about 12 books here that he wrote. Of course, the most well-known of his books is the book that's right in front of you, which is called Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Now, what I have here, if you look at it, it says the abridged version, which was done by Darussalam. So what Ibn Kathir did is that, because remember what his strength was collecting knowledge and writing. So what he did is that he collected everything he could on the subject and he wrote it down. Now, the problem with that is that everything that you collect and you write it down and you pass it, your intention is that the people who are going to be reading it are going to be people who also have the basic understanding of the rules of the Sharia, that they will understand. So, for example, in his original full version, many stories from the Judeo-Christian tradition are present. Now, if you are even a beginner student of knowledge, you understand that when it comes to Isra'iliyyat, stories that are coming to us from the Bible, from the Jews, from anywhere other, basically from the Judeo-Christian only tradition, the rule with regard to them is that if they contradict the Qur'an and Sunnah, then we reject them completely. No arguments about that. If they confirm what the Qur'an and Sunnah say, then we accept them, because we're not necessarily accepting them, we're accepting the Qur'an and Sunnah, and this matches, so we have no problem accepting that. Now, the third case is where they're giving additional information, which we have no way of authenticating. Is this true or not? For example, something like, Musa alayhi salam went on this journey with a young boy. Okay, so the Judeo-Christian tradition will say the name of the young boy was this and this, and his age was this many years old. Now, this is extra information. If we mention it, it's not going to do any harm. It's not going to necessarily bring a whole lot of extra benefit, but if you want to just use it to color in the blanks, the details, there's no problem in that, as long as you understand that this is coming from Isra'iliyyat. Now, what happens is that for a person who is not trained, who doesn't have even the beginner background in Islamic knowledge and understanding this, they may read something like that his age was 12 years old and he was accompanying the Prophet and maybe something happened, he got married or something like that. They will come to us and they say, look, it says in Tafsir Ibn Kathir that this 12-year-old boy got married, for example. I'm just giving an example. So we would say, hey, wait, is there an Islamic problem with a 12-year-old getting married? Of course, we're talking, from a puberty standpoint, from only the Islamic. So this 12-year-old boy gets married. We say, well, if Islamically there's no problem, there's no problem. But where is this coming from? You can't use this to argue against the Qur'an and Sunnah. If Qur'an and Sunnah says, no, you have to be older, for example, age of puberty for some maybe 15 years old. That's the minimum that you need in order to be able to get married. Okay, that wasn't the example I was intending. But basically, if that is what it is, what the Qur'an and Sunnah says, you can't use Isra'iliyyat to argue against that. Okay? So he collected all of it, and it is a very, very good tafsir, with the point that needs to be kept in mind that the full version has Isra'iliyyat. It also has weak narrations, which was again meant for other students of knowledge to be able to sift through them and understand. Now, whenever there's a weak narration, one of the things that the scholars wrote them for is because they said, you know what, we are not able to authenticate it, but maybe someone will come later and they will have access to information that I don't, and they will be able to say that this narration is authentic. So we don't want to lose this. We don't want to lose it. It's like, like how you have paintings, famous paintings. So they have the actual finished version, and then they also have drafts, right? They find like, okay, this was a second draft, this was a third draft that he had done before the original one came out. Now many hundreds of years pass, and now the original one is worth, $500 million. The draft is also worth a lot because there's a certain change in it which tells you a lot of information. So if you can authenticate it, there's actually some benefit. So later scholars came and they do that. They look at the ahadith which were declared weak before, and they assess them, and they have other information that that earlier person may not have had. They say, well, this narration is authentic. This narration is authentic. This narration is authentic. So had the earlier scholar said, okay, delete everything, delete all the weak narrations, we would have lost them, and no one later would have been able to see if they are authentic or not. Okay? So what Darussalam did, Darussalam is a publisher. What they did is that they took his tafsir and they cleaned it up, and they took off all of the Isra'iliyyat, and they took off all of the weak narrations. There's poetry in there. They cleaned that up as well, because the English reader is not able to understand. But what you have here now is a very clean version of Ibn Kathir's tafsir. So basically, what is the method of tafsir? The method of tafsir is that when you read an ayah of the Qur'an, the first thing that you do is you try to find an ayah that explains this ayah. So for example, when we say, Siratul ladina an'amta alayhim, oh Allah, guide us to the path of those whom you have an'amta alayhim, that you have been, what's the word? You have blessed. You have rewarded, or you have given them your blessings. So now the explanation of this comes in Surah An-Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ. So these are the people we are saying, Ya Allah, guide us to the path of the Nabiyyin, the prophets, وَالشُّهَدَاء وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاء وَالصَّالِحِينَ. Ya Allah, this is the path to guide us to. So the first method of explaining the Qur'an is to explain it with the Qur'an. And you will see that he will say, for example, an ayah, and then he will bring about other ayat from the Qur'an and say that, look, this ayah is talking about this ayah is talking about this. Then, if you run out of that, then you go to a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, what the Prophet has said this ayah means. What the Prophet has said this ayah means. So, for example, if the Prophet said that such and such is not allowed, and then he had recited an ayah of the Qur'an, so he would bring that and he would say that, look, this ayah, its interpretation is that such and such thing is not allowed, or it is allowed, or whatever the case is. After the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, then we have to go to the understanding of the Sahaba. What did the Sahaba say about that? So basically, Abdullah ibn Umar said that this ayah means this. Abdullah ibn Abbas said this ayah means this. Those scholars, those Sahaba from among the scholars who were known for explaining and teaching the Qur'an, they will basically tell you that. And then after that, he would go to the Tabi'in, the next generation, who said, this ayah means this. So you will find some common names, primarily the students of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, the students of Abdullah ibn Umar, the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas. They then passed on. They said, you know what? This is what Ibn Abbas said about this ayah. Ibn Mas'ud, if you remember, he said that there isn't a single surah of the Qur'an except that I can tell you where it was revealed, why it was revealed, and who it was revealed about. And he said that 70 surahs of the Qur'an were revealed in front of my eyes. I was there. I was a witness to 70 surahs of the Qur'an. So now, to be able to understand, okay, what does Ibn Mas'ud say about this ayah is very important, right? So he basically collects all of that, and then the ahadith on that matter, the statements of the Sahaba on that matter. So here, what I see in this narration is that he brings the sources of the tafsir, and then he talks about Israeli accounts and tales. Okay, that this is the extra stuff that has been added, and then at the end of it, he will, if there is difference of opinion, then Ibn Kathir will say that my opinion on this matter is so and so. My opinion on this matter, and that's so important. You might say, why would you say that? Just leave it as is. But you know what? You actually end up, if I just tell you there are 4 opinions on this matter, you walk away more confused than you walked in here. So the scholars say that if you discuss multiple opinions, then you should tell at the end of it that you should tell which opinion you prefer and for what reason. So that if there is a person who is not capable of differentiating between different opinions and weighing them, that person will walk away completely confused. So at least give them a way out that, okay, this is the one that I think makes sense. So at least that person can say, okay, I will just stick with that. I will just stick with that. So this is the case of the tafsir of the Qur'an, which is Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Again, this is 10 volumes which are abridged. 10 volumes that have been shortened. The bigger one is the full complete one. I have a complete copy in Urdu language upstairs. It has a very, very small text. It's only 5 volumes, but the amount of text that it has is like double this. So it's really big. I was actually trying to bring an Arabic version of it to show you, but I was running late, so I left it and I just brought this one. Now, Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, he also wrote another very famous book. Well, not one other, but many other very famous books. And the second one, which is the most famous one, is called Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya, which literally means the beginning and the end. So he starts off in Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya. And Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya is also, I think that's even bigger than Tafsir Ibn Kathir. He starts off from the beginning of the creation, and he talks about everything that he could collect. And he wrote that down, that this is how the creation began, the story of Adam alayhi salam, lots and lots of details, and continuing all the way until he covers all of the prophets, every generation that was there between them, anything that he could collect, he wrote that. Until he reached the Prophet ﷺ. Then he wrote the entire seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Then he wrote the lives of the Sahaba, the major events that happened from a historical perspective, that this year this happened, this year this happened, this year this happened. And he kept going on all the way until his time. Okay? So 700 years of history from the time of the Prophet, and whatever before, thousands of years from the time of Adam to the Prophet ﷺ. He wrote that. Now, what are you going to do after you reach your time? Where would you go? Future. What's the future? Future is death and the day of judgment. So then he wrote about how the world is going to end. The signs of the day of judgment, the fitan that will come before, the trials and tribulations, and what will happen on the day of judgment, what will Jannah be like, what will hellfire be like. And he wrote everything that he could write on that. So it's literally Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya, the beginning and the end. Okay? So then he writes some other famous books as well. Some of these books actually, he began an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari, but he did not finish it. He also summarized al-Bayhaqi's al-Madkhal, which was also not printed. He summarized Ulum al-Hadith by Abu Amir ibn Salah, and he called it Mukhtasar Ulum al-Hadith, and As-Sirah al-Nabawiyya, and he wrote a book on jihad. Basically, a whole lot of books. And then from these books, many publishers, for example, they took out the signs of the Day of Judgment from Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya, and they published it separately. And they took out all of the stories of the prophets. So when you see Qisasul Anbiya by Ibn Kathir, is basically something that's taken out from the major book, which is Al-Bidaya wa Nihaya. So again, if you were to gather, he lived for 74 years. He lived for 74 years and he died in Damascus, and he was buried there. Before he passed away, he lost his eyesight. However, the rest of him, he was in good health until he died. He was in good health until he died at the age of 74, and he died in Damascus and was buried there. So, okay, there, I just got the volume number 1 from home. So this is my copy, and if you look at it, I mean, it's very small text, and it's very hard to read, but you gotta be really, and Arabic is also like that, which is that in all of this page, basically there's only one ayah here, and the rest of it is all tafsir all the way up to here. It's just, explanation and this narration and that narration and everything about that. So, the thing that I was mentioning is that a lot of the books, Qisas al-Anbiya, for example, same thing. We just have to keep in mind that either a publisher has abridged it, meaning they have summarized it, they have taken out narrations which are not for the average person to be reading, they are meant for the students of knowledge. Other than that, this is a very, very beneficial work, and especially this Darussalam version for the English language reader, for kids to be able to read the Qur'an, to have the initial connection to the Qur'an. This is a very good tafsir, and I specifically bought this, that I'm going to leave it here, and anybody wants, you can come and you can just take a look through, how easy readable it is, that it's enjoyable. If an ayah came to your mind, you want to go look it up, each of the volumes are numbered, that okay, from this ayah to this ayah is here, so you can go look it up and you can read all about it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant Ibn Kathir rahimahullah an immense reward for all of what he did and what he left behind. He was someone who, as we said, he was recognized for the amazing benefit that he gave the ummah in his books while he was still alive. And of course, it has just continued on. And thus today, just like Imam an-Nawawi rahimahullah, that Ibn Kathir's tafsir is present in every single bookstore and possibly in every single masjid in the world. Every masjid has a little library. One of the main books that you will find anywhere is Tafsir Ibn Kathir. And this is from the qabul. This is from the acceptance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a person, that people come and they find benefit in your work, and now they are able to then, it's sadaqatul jariyah for that person. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from him and to make it from among the good deeds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for him and accepted from him. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la